ate some of the suckiness of going back to school, and you guys actually like it. And hey, that's good. I like school when I was going. High school definitely a tough time for me, so that's all right. Hey, I was gonna embarrass them, but I don't think they're here right now. Thomas and Mary, are they here? Well, we'll give them an applause, even though they're not here. You can boo them when next time you see them. This is the last time. Wednesday will be the last time you see them as single people. 6 days from the said it, they get married. So, last night we were at Thomas' house, having a bachelor party, hanging out, going around the pool, playing games, and eating burgers and stuff. But if I'm walking a little funny today, if you guys notice, I'm kind of like penguin style, a little bowed, because I have enormous blisters. Like seriously, I got one this big on my big toe, and one this big, a little smaller on my left foot. So, I'll show you later, Nate. No worries. I'll get there for you. No, so if I'm walking a little lopsided, if I fall on my face up here, that's why. Just so you guys know. Just want to let you know that. Hey, today we are going through this is our last day to be talking about the lineage of Jesus, as we talked about the last few weeks over the summer. It's been spotty. People have been out of town and everything like that. But this is the last day. We're going to kind of wrap it up. And to wrap it up today with a really important person. You guys have heard of him for sure. King David. He's one of the most prominent, respected men in the entire Jewish and Christian history combined. And there's many reasons for that. We're going to go into that in a second. But first, before we get there, I want to recap real quick. If you want to put that slide up there. Some of you guys have this. You guys still have this on you? The thing that Kevin made? No? It's a bookmark, man. Parker, disappointing. Anyway, so here's where we started. We started with Abraham. All the way over here. This is in the Old Testament, Genesis. We moved from Abraham, we talked about his faithfulness. Kevin talked about it a while ago. Judah and Tamar was a little after, just about some of the sin issues there, how God used that for his glory. That was right in this area also, in the Old Testament. Then we jumped all the way over here. This is the divided kingdom we were talking about. I talked about Manasseh, you guys remember a couple weeks ago. And then Baker, last week, talked about Solomon, and showed us just kind of how leading a nation, both of those men showed us how leading a nation is a big deal. And we got to remember what God says. So now we're backtracking one more. You see Solomon right there. There's King David. He's the second king of Israel. That's where we are today. So you guys know in the lineage of Jesus. And I'm excited to talk about David. David is probably one of the most prominent men, as I said. And I'm excited just to be able to just talk about him. Because really, in reality, he's a historical king. And I get here a lowly, just human being who goes to church to talk about an amazing king back a long time ago. So, briefly on the greatness of David. David was great for many reasons. A lot of you guys know the story of David and Goliath. I'm sure you've heard that. David is known as a faithful, trusting man in God because he trusted that God would slay Goliath for him with a slingshot, basically, which is a pretty big ordeal. So David's known for his faithfulness there. David's also known because at King Saul, the king you saw right before David, the first king of Israel, pretty bad guy, gave David a really hard time. He trusted God through that time. He trusted him that God said, you're going to be king, you're going to have to deal with some tough stuff, but this is basically, you trust in me, and I'll bring these things to you. So he's faithful there. He's also known as a great war hero, because Saul was known, there's a saying in the Old Testament, in a few chapters before we're going to go into one today, that's Saul slew his thousands, and David has slew his 10,000. He's killed 10,000s. So it's a joke, really running gag, just smacking in the face of the king. And David, hey, he's a better warrior than Saul was. Also, and this is the most important part, obviously you guys know, we talked about it, I just talked about it a second ago, in Jesus' lineage. David is a great ancestor, about 1,000 years before Christ. So, and through David, God promised, we're going to bring this line. We're going to bring the Messiah through you. And then that came to pass. So David's known great things. Very prominent man, as I said. Now, things, however, change in what we're going to look at today. I don't know how familiar you guys are with David and Bathsheba, the account of David's pretty ridiculous and heinous sin against a married couple in his kingdom. But that's what we're going to look at today. This is kind of a hinge, it's kind of like a swinging door in David's kingdom. All this other stuff I was telling you before was all before this. This part happens, and then all of a sudden we have a kingdom that is not the way that God wanted it, and it's the kingdom infested with more sin than was before because of David's sin. So why don't you guys turn there, 2 Samuel chapter 11, if you got your Bibles, look at you. If not, you got it in the back, just come find me after, or one of your leaders can get you one. Why don't you guys turn there? What What we're going to do is we'll go through the story a little bit. We'll go through this account of David and Bathsheba. We'll comment on it a little bit, explain some things. Then we're going to come back to it. We're going to go study a little deeper because there's a lot of significant stuff here. All right, so 2 Samuel chapter 1, or chapter 11, excuse me. It's about this far in the Bible, really close to the beginning. We'll start here in verse 1. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. Okay, here's the big deal. Right here. This is a turning point. This is a part where David made a mistake because he stayed back. When kings go to war, it says, or when the city goes to war, when the Israelites go to war, the king goes with them. It's like Leonidas. You guys remember 300. If he didn't go to war with them, they would not have the bravery and the courage and fortitude to be able to stop all these armies. So it's basically like, take the movie 300, take Leonidas out, pretty much not an entertaining movie. So this is David taking himself out of the battle that he should be facing, therefore leaving himself with a lot of extra time on his hands. Now verse 2, one evening David got up from his bed and walked around on the floor of the palace. From the roof he saw a young woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. And David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" And David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. And it says, she had purified herself from her uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, "I'm pregnant." Now, that parentheses right there is basically saying her time of the month had just happened before this incident. Okay? So, you guys know what I'm talking about. You'll learn at school someday. Ladies, you know what I mean? So, anyway, it's basically saying that she's not pregnant before this. She's not pregnant. Okay? So this baby is for sure David's. This is David's adultery and baby from this situation. Already getting pretty intense right from the get-go. Now we move on to the second part where David instead of confessing, he decides to do something else. So David, verse 6, sent this word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Basically small talk, avoiding the situation. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go down to his house. Okay, this is the first in a series of 3 tries that David's going to try to get Uriah to actually go in and sleep with his own wife so the baby can be thought of as theirs. Okay, back in the time there's no DNA test, there's no way they're ever going to be able to tell that it's David's baby. So he figures, it's right around the same time, then I have Uriah go in there. Problem solved. It's their baby. You'll never know. Okay, so this is the first try. Obviously, it fails because he says he slept by the master's servant's house. Verse 10. This is David's response to him. When David was told Uriah did not come home, he asked him, "Haven't you just come from a distance? Why didn't you go home?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my master Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open fields. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." So, Uriah is a pretty noble guy. All the army, he's basically doing what David should have done. He's saying, "No, I'm not going to go satisfy myself with pleasure. There's a war going on, and I need to be out there. And I shouldn't be doing this because this is not right." And it was part of the custom of the time for soldiers not to sleep with their wives and to stay away from that because they're out to war. Okay? So David's trying to tempt this noble guy, and he's already looking horribly bad here, but he thinks he's getting away with it. Then David said to him, second try, "Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants and did not go home again. He did not go home. Second try, failed. Good job, David, but I don't think you're going to get away with this one. Now he does deliver a third try because David is not going to relent here. He obviously is pretty scared about being found out. So here's a third try, this is the most heinous act right here. So while Joab, verse 16, so while Joab had the city on, verse 14, back up. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it he wrote, "Put Uriah in the front line where the fighting is fiercest, and withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." He gives him his own death warrant, and he says, "Here you go, take this letter to the general of the army. Hope war goes well," knowing that the whole time Uriah is walking all the way up through the desert back to the place where He didn't open it. It's a pretty amazing thing how faithful Uriah is being to the king and how devious and sinful David's being to him because of this incident. Pretty serious stuff. So he takes the letter down there. Skip down to verse 22. Basically what happens after that is he sends it out. Uriah ends up getting killed. And Joab puts him in the front line. He also puts other soldiers with him. So then Joab, the general, sends a messenger to David to tell him what happened. Verse 22. The messenger set out, and when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, "The men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, where we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead." The real thing that David wanted to know. And in the process, you see that verse right before, other innocent guys died, all at the hands of David's sin. So this sin is not just affecting himself. It's affecting Bathsheba. It's going to affect this child that is conceived. It's affecting his husband. It's affecting all these people in the battlefield. A lot of sins going on right now. All because David decided not to watch himself and to move away from his intentions. So you see here what David's response. He says to Joab, "Don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it." Say this to encourage Joab. So he's just saying, all right, man, 8 people die in war. Well, go ahead and take the city. When Uriah's wife, verse 26, heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. Here's the real important sentence right here. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. There's another translation I was reading, my Bible, a different one. It says the thing that he did is evil in the eyes of the Lord. I think that's a much better way of putting it, because it displeases God, yeah, but, I mean, come on, this is a pretty evil, devious act that David's just done. So now we come to chapter 12, and this is where it's going to get heavy for David. So the first part, he commits this crime, he commits this sin, and he's covering up. Now he's going to be confronted on it. He's not getting away with that. Nathan, the prophet, comes to David, and he just tells him the story. When he came to him, he said, there were two men, reading chapter 12, there were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, he grew it up with him and his children. He shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now, the traveler came to the rich man. The rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come, which he has hundreds, as it says. Instead, he took the one ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. He took the ewe lamb right out of his hands, killed it dead, and served it to this traveler. Even though he had plenty. Man, this guy's got tons. There's no reason that he needs to take from anyone else, but he takes it from this poor man unjustly and kills it and serves it to him. Now David, verse 5, he's pretty upset about this. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and had no pity on the man." David basically is condemning himself. This is a story we're going to see in just a second here, verse 7. The story's about him. And Nathan said to David, "You are the man." Not you are the man in a good sense. You are the man in a very bad sense. You're the rich guy. You're the rich guy who stole the poor man's ewe lamb. Do whatever you want to. So then he continues, and then Nathan gives the prophecy. "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I know you king over Israel. I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore the sword will never depart from your house." Here's the consequence. "Because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own." Continues. "This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household I'm going to bring calamity upon you, severe destruction. Before your very eyes I will take your wives, David, and give them to one who is close to you and who will lie with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel." He's going to make a mockery of David in a sense, because of this horrible thing he's done to this faithful soldier and his wife. Just minding their own business before this. They're just doing what they had to do for their king, for God. Now this this interesting turn. Then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Confession, finally. It took all this time. It took the harsh rebuke from Nathan, from God, for him to say, I have sinned against the Lord. I just realized it. David didn't know he was doing this before. Sure he did. But now he's finally come clean. He's finally confessed it. Nathan replies, and I love this, the Lord has taken away your sin. Grace. Confession from David, grace from God. Okay? Keep your mind on that part. We're going to come back to it. You're not going to die, because by doing this you have made the enemies of the Lord show utter contempt. The son born you will die. Now, here's another, that part right there. The enemies of the Lord show utter contempt against the Lord. He's basically saying, and this is something we've talked about before in here, hey, how you live your life is going to reflect who God is. So now just because you did this, you just showed God, you just proved him wrong. You just proved him that this stuff happens with his people all the time. You just made God's name bad. So this is, we're not going to talk about that much, but I think it's another very deep reminder to remember, hey, what we do with our lives matters. People will notice. People are going to look and see, man, I wonder what the deal with God is if that guy that says he's Christian, that girl says Christian is doing that. Important reminder. And so down the road here we see what happens later is David. David does lose his son. The next few verses we see he loses his son. He has another son with Bathsheba called Solomon, who Baker talked to you about last week. This is the son that stays alive. And then down the road, if you keep reading down this account, some pretty horrible stuff happens in David's kingdom. His sons are fighting, all kinds of terrible things are happening in his family. There's a lot of infighting going on, and his kingdom is never the same after this moment. Now, there's a huge amount, as I was looking through this, I was thinking about how this pattern, this flow of thought that's going on in David and the things that he's doing is so realistic to our lives. I think that's why God put this in here. That when sin is occurring, there's a pattern that seems to follow suit in the way that we are sinful in ourselves. Now, if you guys are taking notes, you can write this down. There's 4 parts to this. David, first, he commits the crime. Okay? He sleeps with Bathsheba, knowing he shouldn't do it. Second, he tries to cover it up. Not confession, he covers it up. Third, he has to get called out because he's gotten too far, and someone needs to stop him. So God comes in personally and stops him. And fourth, you see the consequences of the sin. Okay, so let's go back through each one of these and briefly camp on each one. First, crime. The crime that he committed. Did you guys see how that worked? I don't know if you follow the flow of David's train of thought. If you go ahead and look back at the top part of that verse, chapter 11, 1 through 5, I believe. David goes from thinking about sleeping with her by seeing her on the roof, then he starts pursuing, starts asking questions. The whole time in his mind, he knows what he wants. Asking questions, find out she's married, he's married too. Then he says, all right, why don't you bring her to me? The whole time, knowing what he's planning on doing, probably covering up with something else, and then he sleeps with her. And this is a very, I don't know if we look at it like this all the time. I know, even just reading it this week, I kind of been convicted on it, is that where did the sin start? You have to answer, but think about it. Where did the sin start? Did it start with him sleeping with her? It started here. It started what he was thinking about. Okay? It started in his mind, then he kept dwelling on it, he couldn't get rid of it. Instead of throwing it out when he grabbed it, or when it came in there, he kept it. And he dwelled on it. And it manifested and it grew, and it turned into sin. Okay? How often do we do this? I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, think about in your personal life, in times when you sin. Think about those times, whether it's maybe you're on the internet, you're on a computer, and a thought pops in your mind, man, I can look at